If you've been to an amusement park recently, chances are you've seen or heard of a hyper coaster. These are incredibly popular coasters above 200 feet tall, and parks have been buying them like they're going out of style. However, over the years, they've evolved from their original state. Magnum XL 200 marked the first hyper coaster, but they've changed a lot ever since. Today, I'm joined by Coastoons to talk about the future of these hypercoasters. In his video, we talked about their evolution over time and how they got to where they are today. Go check it out if you haven't already. Also, make sure to subscribe to Coastoons as well. He's getting like 500 or 1,000 subscribers a day or something like that. He makes very informative content, but also keeps it very entertaining, so definitely go check out his channel and subscribe. But I'm guessing 95% of you are already subscribed, so you're good. We left off on Hyperion and Intamin Hyper at Energylandia. This was Intamin's first traditional hyper in quite a while, and it marked the start of inversions on their hypers. However, they weren't the first manufacturer to build inversions into hypercoasters. 2 years prior, Mach built their first hypercoaster called Flash. This ride had an abundance of inversions, including a massive vertical loop that wraps around the lift hill. Not only did this give Intamin the green light to put inversions on theirs, but this was the first time hypers went from big drawn out airtime hills to more creative elements. Inversions, ejector hills, twisty sections, they're all very unique from anything we've seen before.
Mach would then go on to build their magnum opus DC Rivals. This is a bucket list ride for pretty much everyone in the community. It legitimately looks like one of the best coasters ever built, with its twisted drop, ginormous non-inverting loop, and of course its pinkish purple color scheme. So, you know, that helps in my books. Mach also built a clone of Flash in Turkey, but no one really cares about that.
But back to Hyperion. It seems Intamin was inspired by Mach to try out some new stuff on their hypers, because Hyperion included in inversion some water effects, a lot of low to the ground twisty sections, and ejector airtime hills. Intamin would later take this to the next level with their mega coaster Conda earlier this year. Conda has outer banked airtime, even more low to the ground sections, sharp ejector, and a full on twisted drop Expedition G-Force style. But that's a little later down the timeline. We have to take it back to 2019 when a new player entered the hyper ring. SNS. SNS built Steel Curtain at Kennywood, and they took inversions on hypers to a whole nother level. This is more reminiscent of the Smiler than any B&M or even Intamin or Mach hyper. It's received mixed reception, but it has been somewhat unreliable, actually very unreliable, and there hasn't been any rumors of any more SNS hypers since, leading me to believe this might have been an outlier rather than the new trendsetter. Steel Curtain featured the most inversions on any coaster in the US, and they're all relatively obscure inversions as well. There isn't a single vertical loop on this ride, which with 9 inversions is a really impressive feat.
SNS was the only player in 2019, but 2020 was a big year for hypers, or at least for B&M. They opened both Candemonium and Orion. Now, Orion is a Giga, but like I said in the first video of this series, Gigas use the same trains and the same track and pretty much the same technology as hypers, so it sort of counts as a hyper. Orion also has mixed reception, but it's generally praised. It's a new centerpiece for Kings Island, and funny enough, it's the second blue space themed Giga in Ohio. A little sad that I can be that specific. But that wasn't the end of B&M's run of dominance in 2020. They also opened Candemonium at Hershey Park. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of Candemonium. To me, it felt a little short, but I know a lot of people who adore this thing. But these two coasters showed B&M trying some of their twistier elements. They'd already been doing that with their Gigas in Flight of the Himalayan Eagle. Wow, that's a mouthful, but Candemonium marked the start of them doing it on their mainline hypers. The Outer Bank thing is alright, but I'm sure as they keep experimenting, they'll eventually get better with it.
I think B&M will continue to build hypers going forward, but I think their Giga model may begin to slow down. Cedar Fair was the only chain really building these, and they filled out most of their major parks with a Giga of some sort. The only major park without a Giga is Knott's, but that can be attributed to their land problem. Other than that, I can't really see Cedar Fair buying any more B&M Gigas for their parks. I do, however, think that they'll buy a B&M Hyper for California's Great America. There was a Hyper in the plans for that park a couple of years back, and it seems to have been pushed back for one reason or another.
My theory is that the Hyper that was gonna go to Kings Dominion got replaced with Twisted Timbers and was supposed to go to California's Great America for 2020, but then the pandemic pushed that back indefinitely, along with the Gravity Group going to Dorney.
Intamin, on the other hand, might have a more promising future in the Hyper market. Depending on how Kana does, they might be able to sell more of this model to parks looking for a standout ride that isn't too expensive. Kana was reportedly only $15 million, which, while certainly not cheap, is a pretty good deal for a 150-foot mega coaster of that quality. If Intamin could get a little cheaper, then they could possibly be in the budget of Six Flags, who is starting to need another manufacturer to turn to, with RMC starting to get more expensive. If Intamin fixes their reliability issues, Six Flags and Intamin could be a serious possibility again. I could see an Intamin Hyper or Mega at St. Louis as a standout coaster, a Mega at Magic Mountain so that wouldn't upstage Goliath, but would also offer a different enough experience that it could work in the somewhat similar height range in relation to Goliath. I could also see a Mega at Over Georgia for the same reason as Magic Mountain. Over Georgia might also need it because it looks like other Georgia parks are starting to step their game up. There was, however, another spark of another manufacturer, Chance Rides. Chance made the Chance Hyper GTX and sold their first one in 2014. Lightning Run is basically a smaller hypercoaster for parks on a budget, and while we haven't seen any since, this could be a promising concept that could help parks on a budget and bring Chance into the mainstream. They could then possibly experiment with more large-scale hypers like Morgan once did. Overall, the future for hypers is bright, but they're definitely changing from what they once were. I want to thank Coastoons for coming on, and a reminder to go check out his part 1 on the evolution over time. We basically covered everything from Magnum up until Hyperion, so make sure to go check that out as well. But with that being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.